Doctor Who Decade by Decade. Evaluating the 2000s. The 2000s were a cataclysmic time for Doctor Who fans. At the beginning of the decade, Doctor Who was effectively dead as a television program. Aside from a few repeats on BBC Two, the program had not been made as a regular television series for over a decade since the end of the 1980s, and the failed attempt at a US TV co-production in 1996 seemed to have further complicated the situation, with rights tangles further reducing the chances of any further series. While Doctor Who fans could console themselves with original novels and the new range of audio adventures from Big Finish, starring many of the classic series Doctor and companion actors, the great majority of Who fans had resigned themselves to the reality that as a TV show Doctor Who was a thing of the past. Most fans were thus utterly stunned on the 40th anniversary of the program in 2003 when the BBC announced that the series would be coming back to television in 2005 for a brand new, full-length season. Fandom was shocked, overjoyed, and maybe just a little bit scared as to what might result. What seemed in little doubt was the fact that the 21st century Doctor Who would be very different from what went before, in terms of production values, pacing and style, and a number of fans privately wondered if the new version of the program could match what had gone before. The series would also be made differently, under the aegis of one head writer, or showrunner, in this case Russell T Davies. This was a major difference from the classic series, which was generally a two-person ship, with the tone and style of the program a collaboration between the producer and script editor, the latter role being nothing more than an administrative post in the new series. Such collaborations could produce very different approaches from the work of just one person, as had been proven in the 1980s, where despite 9 seasons of the program being produced by the same man, John Nathan Turner, those seasons produced wildly different results when he was paired with no less than 3 different script editors. The science is good, humor is bad mentality of the thankfully short-lived Christopher H. Bidmed, the action-centric and increasingly grim tenure of Eric Saward, and the surreal, graphic novel sensibility of Andrew Cartmel that brought such a unique feel to the Sylvester McCoy era of the program. Those wildly different approaches would not take place under the solo showrunner system, something that would be particularly noticeable under Davies' successor in the 2010s, Stephen Moffat, whose tenure lasted just 2 years short of JNT's record and gained increasing criticism from its repeated recycling of the same ideas and tropes, to ever-diminishing effect. The Russell T Davies era lasted the whole of the remainder of the 2000s, ultimately amounting to 4 seasons and a handful of specials, making him now the 4th longest-serving Who producer behind Barry Letts, Stephen Moffat and JNT. Series 1 aired in 2005, with 2 immediate responses. One was being a huge mainstream success, while the other was dividing classic series fandom. This was nothing inherently new, given that the 1980s and even the closing era of the 1970s, the era under the aegis of producer Graham Williams, had also divided and continues to divide classic series fandom. Yet the division created by the advent of the new series would prove to be the most tumultuous yet as time went on. The casting of gritty actor Christopher Eccleston seemed to sell the idea of a serious Doctor Who, something seemingly affirmed by Davies himself in media interviews, and yet that was not entirely an accurate perception of the new series, which was still very much a family show and contained extremely high levels of humor, arguably more than any era since the Williams era, or at least the one off season 24. This itself annoyed many older fans, citing the burping wheelie bin in Rose and the farting aliens in Aliens of London as particular embarrassments. The advent of 45-minute single-story episodes also distanced the series still further from the classic series, with the cliffhanger, once an integral part of the series, now reduced to an optional extra that has become even rarer during the Moffat era. But the series was a success. New fans began to embrace the series, and at this point new series critics were still very much in the minority even among classic fans. The early exit of Eccleston stirred a minor controversy, but the casting of David Tennant as the 10th Doctor proved to be a masterstroke as far as the series' mainstream popularity went, with the second series proving an even bigger hit than the first and making Tennant a superstar in the role. However, the second series proved to be even more divisive than the first, with the ill-advised pseudo-romantic relationship between the 10th Doctor and Rose causing consternation among older fans. A new breed of fan, one seemingly solely attracted to the series by that romance and by Tennant himself, began to emerge, even as the new series' skeptics among older fans began to increase in number. Despite William Hartnell's first Doctor having been a grandfather, a decision taken largely to justify the presence of a teenage girl on the TARDIS in the early 60s, and at a time when many assumed the Doctor was actually a human from the future rather than the alien he was eventually revealed as, the Doctor had otherwise been depicted as entirely asexual throughout the whole run of the original series, and the romanticization and sexualization of the character did not go down well with a sizable proportion of classic fans, who felt that both the character and the series was being compromised and bastardized in order to pander to an audience demographic that would otherwise have been uninterested in a science fiction adventure program. Fans were further alienated, if not downright infuriated, by the retcon characterization of Sarah Jane Smith, a classic series companion brought back to the series in Series 2. Which implied that she had had a similar romantic fixation with the Doctor as did Rose, the current companion. This had never been remotely suggested or hinted at on screen in the original series run, and the retcon did little to impress or endear the new series to those fans critical of this development. The second series was also notably much weaker than the first in terms of scripts, with the reintroduction of the Cyberman being a particularly poorly handled situation. The end of the season, with an extended epilogue dealing with Rose's exit and an ending designed to leave a particular kind of viewer weeping into their hankies, likewise did not impress those fans appalled at the insertion of such a subplot into the series in the first place. The third series was equally as successful despite the loss of the first new series companion in Rose. And while many older fans preferred her replacement due to the lack of consensual romantic interest between her and the Doctor, the fact she carried an unrequited romantic interest in him, while he still pined for the still absent Rose, caused many a classic fan to roll their eyes in disdain and wonder why such slushy shit had to be included in the first place. However, the third series was otherwise generally stronger than the second, and many episodes achieved considerable critical acclaim, including the Human Nature two-parter, which I think is a pile of shit, but there you go, and Blink. The reintroduction of the Master at the end of the series however seemed to cause another rupture, with the last of the Time Lords episode being something of a straw that broke the camel's back moment for many. While the series remained massively popular, those classic series fans who had been unconvinced by the new version of the program seemed particularly incensed by this installment, and the schism between the new and old generation of fandom began to become wider than ever. The fourth season initially courted controversy with the casting of comedienne Catherine Tate as the new companion, but won over many fans, and the series was another success, with the final episode achieving one of the highest ratings the series had ever enjoyed, albeit spurred on by a fake-out cliffhanger implying the David Tennant Doctor was about to regenerate, only to subsequently do no such thing. The series went on to a quasi-hiatus in 2009, offering a small number of specials that marked the exit of both Tennant and Russell T Davies, to much media hype. There is little doubt that the 2000s were a massively successful period of Doctor Who, at least in terms of the mainstream audience. But the mainstream audience reaction was most certainly not the whole story, and in many ways the Russell T Davies version of the program was a wildly different program than the classic series, even given the tonal shifts that had occurred within eras within the original series. The gap in years between the end of the original series and the start of the new only increased the schisms within fandom, and it was not just old series fans with the issues. While many new series fans have gone on to embrace the original series, and indeed it is not altogether uncommon to find many who discover the program via the new series only to end up actually actively preferring the classic series, there are just as many new series snobs who describe themselves as fans while never having seen and being completely uninterested in watching the original series due to its age. This schism would increase still further in the subsequent decade, with many fans who fell in love with the Davies era of the program coming to despise the Moffat version, and vice versa. It is fair to say, particularly now, that there is really no such thing as an average Doctor Who fan. My own personal stance on the new series has been well documented in many of my other videos. In regards to the 2000s, otherwise known as the Davies era, at the time I regarded it as my least favorite era of the program, and still generally see it as inferior to all eras of the original show. I still like Series 1, and think Christopher Eccleston was a very fine Doctor I would have liked to have seen more of, really like Series 3 and enjoy a number of other episodes such as Tooth and Claw and Midnight. However, many aspects of the era I find grating, particularly Tennant's often too human, too preachy, and just plain too unlikable Doctor, the hideously drippy Rose stuff, and a number of appalling episodes such as New Earth, Voyage of the Damned, Partners in Crime and Journey's End. The fact that Journey's End is regarded by me as possibly the worst single episode of the program ever broadcast, yet is wildly popular and regarded as an exciting classic by many fans of the era, is in itself a telling marker of how wildly different the perception of the program can be between people who are ostensibly lovers of the same thing. My attitude to the Davies era has softened slightly today, both because most of the subsequent era has proved to be much worse, and because today it is a simple matter to overlook the innumerable turkeys on offer throughout the period and simply enjoy the good stuff. Yet despite that good stuff, this era is never going to be one of my favorites, and many of its flaws and issues would continue unabated into the Moffat era, which then ended up adding a whole host of other ones too. Overall, the highest mark I can give the Davies era, and Doctor Who in the 2000s, is a middling C+.